Hello, Charlie TCG here, and Worlds is just a week away. So I thought I'm going to do my breakdown for my top 8 picks for the World Championships. What decks are going to do well from looking at this matchup-wise. There's also some deck profiles and kind of my honest thoughts about where I see them in the meta. As you know, a couple of days ago, I did a tier list breakdown, kind of showcasing exactly what I thought some of the decks could be positioned. But I've had some time to reflect upon it. I've changed my answer about where I think the top archetypes are, and even some seed list or B or A decks kind of like change around as well. So I thought I'd break down exactly where are my thoughts and feelings about some of the good top picks for the World Championship. So I'm going to start with my number 8 pick, Snorlax Stall. Now you might go, Charlie, why have you chosen this? If you look at this matchup, it's not terrible. It has a really good Chien Pao, Inteleon Urshifu, and Lugia deck, but not really too strong Fusion Mew, Gudra, and Arc Duraludon and Arctina, but decent enough Gardevoir and Giratina and Lost Box. Now this is really powerful because the block ability stops any of your opponent's Pokemon from retreating, which is really, really strong as well. But we are seeing a bit of an increase in pennies, increase in decks which have switching cards in there, or even Escape Roast. If we look at Lost Zone decks, they play counter switching outs as well. Baxcalibur is kind of like going to more the cross switch as well. So there are some outs of loads of these decks here, but it could be an absolute nuisance to potentially get you a couple wins. And even the online position, it's at 39th place. So this is kind of like a rough sort of archetype, which I potentially would be playing. I am not the best at stall playing. I do admit that. But I think it's really interesting the way how it's played here. The multi different supporters options, the styling, Team Yes, Chill, and Power Pad, kind of getting that loop in there, so you're constantly using any of your supporters you may have there. Misfortune Sisters for that Milsel effect here. The Abominable as well to kind of milsel some of the opponent's Pokemon as well by blocking some in the active spot. Pidgeot V is really powerful as well, so you never got to deck out. And obviously the Penny Loop is really powerful as well. And most importantly, you play Arven here because you can get any of the item cards you might potentially need. And that Bravery Charm to give that Snorlax 200 HP. And that Forest Steel Stone to kind of get any of the kind of like Pokemon you might want to have to attach them to your Abominable. Rotom for that draw factor, and Pidgeot V as well. Radiant Trina is that little bit of a healing factor in it, but I generally think as a stall archetype, this potentially could do quite well. So I'm going to put that in the number 8 spot. Now, number 7, I have put Fusion Mew. Now, you might go here, look at the results. It's won 2 championships. It's got a top 8. It's had top 16. And online ranks, it's like 5th. And look at it matchup-wise. Pretty decent overall, but only the real poor matchup being like the Lost Box archetypes. Well, I generally think that Mew is going to have a huge target on itself. It's did incredibly well over in Asia, so a lot of people in the Asian community are going to potentially be having Mew as like their focus point, going, you know what, we need to really target that deck because we're going to potentially be seeing quite a lot of it because it won the last 2 big events over in Asia. And as well as we're going to see a lot more increase in Drapion. And if we're going to see the increase of Gardevoir as well, Mew's going to be caught in that crossfire because it had that dark weakness. And as you know, people in Worlds always keep their testing really close to their chest. Like unique archetypes potentially that could do well. We're always kind of like hidden away, and we potentially going to see a big box archetype around that, which will be focusing on dark Pokemon. So I think Mew VMAX really just falls under that crossfire as well. I generally think it's a really powerful deck. If you look at the matchup-wise, really strong, but I think it's a pick for Worlds. May not be as strong as people might think about it, because it's going to have a huge amount of target on its head. And if we just look at the really like clean, straightforward and Mew list here, I generally think it's really, really powerful. The Ice Cube as well for that block slider is amazing and really help Mew kind of like push out a little bit more, be a bit more of that consistent build here. The Fusion Strike energy stops Ting-Lu, stops Spiritomb from being around there. And then the higher counts of the Forest Steel Stone and having Cleansing Gloves really helps to consistent other matchups here. Focusing not just on Path to Peak, but having Lost City as well, kind of getting rid of those one-off attackers, getting rid of potentially Dragonite V, or more importantly now, the Gardevoir pieces that are kind of going around there. If you get rid of potentially both Gardevoir EXs, or potentially the baby Gardevoirs, you're in a really, really good spot in the game, and it can really help win the game that sort of way here. I generally think this deck is really, really powerful, but as a pick for Worlds, I don't think it's going to be as strong as people might think because it has so much target on its head, which is a huge success it's had over in the rest of the world. Now, my number 6 pick is Chien Pao, and honestly, this is my favorite archetype right now. I love it as well. I think it gained quite a few fun cards, obviously, in Obsidian Flames, but we're not going to talk about that. We're talking about what it's had now, and it's had decent success, a top 16 and a top 32, and it's ranked 3rd over in the online events. Looking at its matchup-wise, yes, you may kind of like go, it doesn't have as strong of a matchup as you might want to have, really bad Fusion Mew and Snorlax Stall matchups, but it has a decent matchup against some other ones, a lot of close to the 50% mark, and some of them are just a little bit below. I generally think Chien Pao is really powerful. The ability to get any 2 water energies and that Hellblade to do a huge amount of damage capability with that Baxcalibur to flood the board with as many energies as you want is really, really powerful. I generally think the Arceus build is the strongest build right now. Kind of like getting that I know you're not going to ever really attack with True Nova, but you have a decent attacking option by having 280 HP, so it's a really good wall to attach some energies to. But more importantly, that Star Buff ability to get any of those 2 cards you might want to have. You get the Irido, which can get the Baxcalibur and Rare Candy you might need, or potentially a double Cross Switcher and the Canceling Clone, which would really come with huge success here. At the huge amount of like mana fees going around there, you've seen loads of Gardevoir, you've seen loads of even like She Empowers as well as Lost Box. Having that cross switcher into the mana fee with the Canceling Clone is really powerful as well, especially with Relic Greninja. Getting those extra 2 prizes can really fling the board state into She Empower, because you need to use your single prize attackers. Because if you attack with She Empower turn after turn after turn, you're going to lose the game. So if you can add this in Relic Greninja, get those 2 prizes that way, you can really kind of like swing the board potentially into your favor as well. You do have to play the 4 copies of Superior Energy Retrieval. I really like that style in the deck here. And Avery as well is really powerful, slowing down the Gardevoirs out there by getting rid of some of their Curlies. If you can time with an Avery plus the Cross Switcher Radiant Greninja Canceling Clone, you're in a tremendous spot. And I generally think nothing can really be prepared and recover after that option. Not just tunnel vision onto that sort of section here, but having a really decent matchup over those single prizes as well by having a one-off single prize attacker can really help you in that matchup. Number 5 is actually Lugia Single Strike. I do know I've covered on a couple last week. I've talked about Lugia potentially could be one of these kind of like these outliner sort of deck archetype here, kind of definitely flying under the radar. Obviously, it dominated like last formats and stuff like that, but Lugia right now is being really, really quiet. And I do think the single strike version is much better than the colorless build. I think the colorless build really struggles with it, not getting those big one-hit KOs every single turn, only rely on just one copy of Weirder to get that KO in the end. Isn't as strong here, as we don't get Mew EX until basically October time legal to play. I think we can kind of like part the colors build and focus more on the single striker here. We can see over its results, it's still doing pretty well. The online results is 7th, so it's still doing pretty well overall. And it's matchup wise as well. You can see here, really decent. The only huge weak ones are the Arceus Drive, ones Gudra and Snorlax Stall. But you can't deny some of these styles one of the strongest abilities Pokemon has ever printed. And just seeing the likes of how Single Strike could evolve, I still think you should play the Urshifu build package. Because we might see a lot of Duraludon kind of ground there, you need to have an answer to it. You're not going to be playing Path to the Peak. You're not going to be playing any like basic energy. So you have to play the Single Strike Urshifu package to do huge amount of damage to get that guaranteed KO on the Duraludon, because it goes through any sort of attacking option. Stone Journal, I still think is a really good option to play in the deck here. You are seeing a couple like fighting weak Pokemon, like Arceus is doing pretty well overall. Miraidon might potentially see some play overall. So having a fighting weak single prize Pokemon is really good to kind of get those extra 2 prizes. And obviously Evaton, Tyranitar are really powerful for those dark type attacking options. Tyranitar has that decent mill effect both to your deck and your opponent's deck. Very consistent build. I will go with this one here, focusing more on the item cost to kind of get any of the Pokemon you want to have, and having an extra like recovery as option as well. Energy split, I think, is really, really powerful. 2 Jet Energy is really good as your switching card options, slowing down the likes of Marwell and the Snorlax going around there. You want to have an answer, you want to have an out to it. So that's why you play the Single Strike Energy, sorry, the Jet Energy, and they still play the Professor Barnett, kind of getting those guaranteed, getting those 2 KOs on 2 discards with those Archeops, to kind of like really fuel for somebody so as quick as possible. Radiant Serena, I still think is really, really powerful in these archetypes, really kind of having that elegant heal, getting that extra like heal those 2 extra damage, kind of slowing down the Sableye as much as possible. I do think this deck is really, really powerful, but I would kind of like put it down to the 5th place purely because there are other sort of decks which I think are much stronger. I'm going to start by looking at Lost Zone Giratina. Yes, a deck which has had so much talk about in the last couple of weeks leading up to Worlds. So many people will say, is this deck good? Is this deck bad? I'd still go in the good section. Just look at the results. It's got quite a lot of top 4s, top 8s, top 16. It's ranked 4th online. Matchup wise is very, very linear. It's either just above 50% or just below 40%. There's nothing lower than that 46% on that Urshifu deck here. Sorry, Lugia Archeops is a 44.7. It's the worst matchup. So if you go that way, it's a really decent deck, very consistent around the board. It has an amazing attack which can pretty much KO anything on the opponent's side. Lost Impact does 280 damage, which is a huge amount of damage as well here. And if we just look at this deck here, I think this is the most consistent build, and I've been testing it a lot, going with my friends, and I think it is the best option. Path to the Peak is really powerful. You only play Radiant Greninja, which has a ability on a rulebox Pokemon. So kind of like slowing down loads of archetypes like Arceus, slowing down Lugia, slowing down Gardevoir, slowing down Muse, even like Duraludon, anything Pokemon will have an ability on play, it's super powerful to be as disruptive as possible. I love the 2 rocks and 1 Iona, or you can go 1 Iona, two Iona, one Roxanne. Always having those options out there. Your opponent might go, oh, you're only playing Roxanne because that's been lost on. I don't need to worry about it. And then you can go, bam, another Roxanne. And that can really surprise the opponent. And I do think that's a really good option in this style of deck. We also play a load of the energy as well here. You shouldn't play less than than 3 waters because you want to be able to attack with Radiant Greninja. I think if you go down to 2, if you prize one or you have to lost in one, it also becomes a bit of a waste. You should have played like a higher counts of grass or psychic energies. Spiritomb is really powerful because you have that disruptive capability against Mew, because obviously Mew is caught in the crossfire, so Spiritomb really helps in that sort of matchup as well. Also slowing down other likes of Luminions and more importantly those Zacians and in Gardevoir decks, slowing down those is really powerful. So I generally think that Lost and Giratina is really powerful in this style of matchup as well here, and Powerpad is Pokegear is underrated in this deck here, making that out to turn 1 Colress, if it goes second, is even stronger. So yeah, generally think that this deck is really, really powerful here. And let's not forget you have Sableye and Cramorant as other really decent attackers options as well. Number 3 pick is actually Gardevoir. And this is when people go, what? Yes, I'm putting Gardevoir down in my number 3 option. Yes, the BDIF, the one that has super good consistency around nearly everything, the best online ranking, the most amount of like champions, top 2s, top 4s, top 8s, top 16, the one that's doing incredibly well overall. I'm putting in the number 3 spot. Similar to like I said with Mew, I think it is so good. People are just going to be teching against Gardevoir, and that's why I'm putting it down at the number 3 option. The amazing psychic racing ability, the amazing tech options it has in the deck, I generally think having it as a third place is really powerful because it is still going to be those decks which people are going to be teching against it. They are going to be really prepared for Gardevoir EX, and that's something you should really be consistent about him. I think people might be worried about ties, especially on day 1. Day 2, potentially, we might see more increase of Gardevoir, but I think if you're going for day 1, Gardevoir just won't potentially get you there. It's going to be that big target on everyone's back here. And if we look at the sort of deck here, it's really consistent and really straightforward. The 2-1-1 split of the roles is kind of where we'd be seeing the option. The teleporting burst is really powerful to kind of put it down to the bench. Memory skip is really good to kind of make sure the opponent can't use an attack. But more importantly, the Sony HP Scarlet and Violet one is good because that 30 damage can kind of like get that KO on the other Gardevoirs that have been out there, or the Zacian Vs. So you kind of use that as another sort of attacking option as well. I think it's really powerful as well. I do play a copy of Penny in here and not a copy of Switch. The reason why I'm playing the Penny option as well, because kind of we need to have that bounce up for Radiant and Greninja as well as Manaphy. I'm not playing the consistency build of just playing like loads of switches, playing high counts of stadium cards. We're playing the high counts of Worker with Power Pad, and 2 copies of Stadium as well. So we're playing that real good out to kind of get Path to Peak. But if potentially they just go boss Manaphy, play Collapse Stadium, and then potentially either pass with Snorlax or use Mawile, you want to have that immediately out to Manaphy. So having that extra two sort of ways to get out of it, playing Power Pad with Penny as well. So you have that extra, like the opponent can do it again, and you still have a way out for it. So I generally think this is why this deck is much stronger going with the Penny sort of build here, and the rest of the item cards are purely based on the consistency build. But VIP Pass, Level Ball, Fog Crystal, Ultra Ball, Rare Candy, Super Rod, all really consistent cards we might see, and the 10-1 split of energy, I really like it. I haven't really seen any space where it can go to 11-1. I still like reversal energy. I think it's really powerful. I know some people are kind of fading away from reversal and kind of going to either 11 or 12 basic, but if I think Gardevoir can really keep up with it, I think you play a 2-10 line of Psychic. Now, my number 2 pick is Lost Box. And as you can see here, Lost Box is pretty good overall, had some really good placements overall. Second place ranking is definitely the turbo build of Lost Box. Sableye has one of the strongest attacks, doing 10 in the Lost Zone. You can put 12 damage counters anywhere. Real big gatekeeper, and I kind of like have seen why stage 2 Pokemon aren't as strong. It's purely because of how powerful Sableye is. We are seeing the slowly resurgence of stage 2 Pokemon like Gardevoir EX, even Baxcalibur, kind of like focusing onto the meta in the fray. So I do think that Lost Box potentially is that number 2 spot because how powerful the turbo build is. We can just see here, I think the Drapion is really powerful. Not only is it really good and gets Gardevoir, but obviously it's Mew, and even the likes, if the likes of Duraludon's kind of going around there, you can kind of attack with a couple less energy. So I do kind of like that as an option. And Dragonite V is a really, really powerful attacking option. And it's quick as early as turn 1. That's where you want to be attacking. You've got Pokestop, you've got Forest Hill Stone, you've got Lost Vacuum, you've got so many switching cards, you have so many Comfies. You want to try and get that turn 1 attack with either Raikou or Dragonite. Heck, even Drapion V is really, really strong. That's kind of where Lost Box really goes with it. Playing a high count of Super means you don't need to worry about how many energies you might discard with the likes of because you have so many more options out there with Mirage K. And I love the Echoing Horn as well in the list as well. I think it's really good as well. Kind of like you can use Sableye, get something knocked out, you bring it back for Echoing Horn, but then you get another 2 prizes that way. Sableye is just super, super powerful, and you don't need to rely too much on your supporters by playing a 2 boss and 4 chorus experiment. Options potentially you could want to add in there is potentially a Clara, could be a good secondary option to have in the style deck, kind of making sure you can kind of guarantee that Sableye plus energy card and not kind of draw into it with like Super Rod and your Comfies and Greninjas and stuff like that. I really like the style deck here. I am putting it as my number 2 pick because my number 1 pick is Arceus Umbreon. Yes, unfortunately there aren't too much like big sort of results in there, so I kind of put it under the Arceus Duraludon, but it obviously did very, very well at NAIC and oversaw events as well here, and there's so many different ways to play it. The cure capability of what Arceus can do to set up any of your V Pokemon with that Trinity Charge ability, that star buff to get any 2 cards you might want to have, and Umbreon VMAX has that Max Darkness, which KOs both Gardevoir and Mew VMAX, which is really powerful, and that Dark Signal, which is like Luxrays and Bright Look or Mean Look or stuff like that, which kind of gust out one of your opponent's Pokemon. I generally think is super, super powerful. The matchup wise is pretty good overall here. Yes, you are focusing on some VMAXs like Duraludon, like Umbreon, but I do think that this deck is super, super under the radar a little bit. Not many people are talking about it. It still did very, very well. People are still playing the likes of Lost Box. People are playing the likes of Gardevoir, are playing the likes of Xian Pao. I do think an Umbreon Arceus style deck is super powerful, and this potentially could be the strongest archetype and the one that I've been really enjoying testing out and been playing so much about it. The Flying Pikachu is really powerful because you're slowing down any of the basic Pokemon you have around there. It's your Lost Box answer. Yes, they might have to gust around everything, but Flying Pikachu can be a real big nuisance. It's ever since we've seen Flying Pikachu, we've seen it do incredibly well every single time. So I do think Flying Pikachu is really powerful. Mage-type V plus Hawlucha and Radiant Alakazam means you can pretty much guarantee get an extra turn potentially, which I absolutely love in a style deck here. The huge capability of disruption this deck has to offer by playing high counts of Boss's Orders and Iona, Path to Speak, and obviously Lost City. Still think Lost City is incredibly powerful in these style archetypes, slowing down any of the returns of potentially Gardevoirs, or more importantly, the likes of having anything really powerful is really, really powerful. I generally think this deck is really good, and that's why I think this build here is super, super consistent, super, super well placed in sort of the meta game. And there are other sort of builds as well, like potentially we could see the Arceus Duraludon build, which obviously got 2nd place at NAIC. Duraludon is still a really, really powerful attacker, not being attacked by any Pokemon which had special energies, which is good, as well as doing 220 damage through anything. Is just incredibly powerful. Now, if we look at other sort of archetypes as well, we can see this Giratina build, which did get in the top 16 at NAIC, is also a good sort of option to have here as another sort of way to kind of like KO these likes of Gardevoirs and Mews around there. But I generally think if we go around any of the builds here, this build here is the strongest archetype here because of the capability it has of the disruptive capability, the capability of get extra prize turns, and more importantly, having Lost City as well to kind of get rid of any of your opponent's attackers. If we see the return of Reggie's, Lost City is incredibly powerful and might shy them away. And obviously, let's talk about Spiritomb, slowing down the opponents of Genesect, slowing down other opponents and Luminions is just really, really powerful, and generally think this has a really good matchup over everything. So I hope this has helped you kind of like break down exactly what I think is going to do well at the World Championships. Hope the tier list was helpful, and obviously these top archetypes was really good to kind of give you a better understanding about where I think all these decks kind of place into it. Do you agree with it? If you don't, please leave a comment down below and kind of let's talk about exactly what decks you might go well with it. As you know, the deck I will be playing will be Xian Pao, and thank you so much for the support on all my Worlds content. Obviously, next week we do have the World Championships, and I'm going to try and cover it as best as I can, as I will I will be away with family, so I will try and cover as many of the new decks that come around as much as possible. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below what will be your pick for the World Championships, and I will see you guys later. Bye for now.